Hello and thank you for joining the PointCentral Administrator Part 1 webinar. Please make sure you're listening through your computer audio or through the GoToWebinar app. It's available to download to your phone from your registration confirmation email. Welcome to today's Calix webinar. We'll be starting shortly. To hear the audio throughout the entire session, enable or adjust your computer audio or download the GoToWebinar app onto your Apple or Android device. Hello and thank you for joining today's webinar. We'll be starting in just a few minutes as many are still continuing to join. For the best audio experience throughout the entire session, please listen through your computer audio if possible and enable and adjust as needed. If computer audio is not possible, you have a link in your registration confirmation email to download the GoToWebinar app onto your Apple or Android device. Hello everyone, thank you for joining the PointCentral Administrator Part 1 webinar. Let's get started with our housekeeping and the legal disclaimer. I'm going to leave this up for just 1 minute to allow you to read that, and then we'll proceed on with the webinar. Next, if you have any questions related to this webinar, you can use the chat feature in the GoToWebinar, and one of the consultants we have on the call will answer you. Any other questions can be answered with our direct support at 1-800-342-2599. I'll be your presenter today. My name is Allie Whitaker, and I'm the Professional Services Training Team Lead here at Calix. Today we're going to be covering how you can add users inside of PointCentral, how you can add user groups, and then setting up the user access rights in the data folders that you've got inside of your PointCentral. So let me go ahead and open up my PointCentral website and we'll get started. I've opened up my PointCentral administration website here. You can see it'll allow you to log in with your username and password. PointCentral only has one user ID and password, so if you have multiple people that need access, they are going to need to share that login. Let me go ahead and type mine in. When you log in, the first screen that's going to come up is your home page. You can see there is a tan box over to the far left with arrows that expand the different sections that give you sub-menus. This list on the left is also the list that is down below. It's just already expanded. It gives you an idea of what each section does. Near the middle of the screen, you'll see a horizontal box that has our Point user licenses. So you can see how many licenses that you have active, how many you have paid for, and then how many you have remaining. Same with the Point mobile users over on the right. If you scroll to the very bottom of PointCentral's first homepage, it'll show you what version of PointCentral you're running on your server. This will give you the information if we do have an update and you need to verify which version you're on. Let's scroll back up to the top. And we're going to start with the users. Let me go over to the users on the far left, expand that, and we're going to go to adding a user today. When you're adding a user, if this is a loan originator, you want to make sure that the name matches their NMLS ID and that it's also spelled the same way that it is inside of your Point drop-downs. That'll become important if you select that they can only see their own loans. They would need to match. Your user ID, we recommend using their email, or you can use another format such as first and last name or first initial last name. Right underneath that, this is where you can set their initial password for them. They will be able to get into Point and change their password, so they don't have to tell you their secret password here. You could just set it. I'm going to use password 1 as an example, and that's the password I would tell the new user, and they could then change that inside of Point under the file heading change password. Below that you have the access rights check boxes. You will need to give access to Point if they are going to be able to log in, and the same for Point Mobile if they have signed up for that. The email slot is just for record keeping. It is not a necessary field in this area. I'm going to go ahead and click Add User. And you can see up at the top we have a message that the user has been added, and we can go ahead and grant them user access if we wanted to do that. You can see also when the screen came up, a couple new fields appeared as well. We now have a secret question and answer area. This is not a required area and will not ask the user for their secret answer. This is just for your admin. If you would like to have another level of security, you could ask them a security question and they would need to give you that answer if you wanted to protect before you reset passwords, for example. I'm going to go back over to our menu bar on the left under Users, And our second option here is list our users. So this will show you all of your users that you have inside of the system. Shows you their user ID on the far left, their full name, and then you can see edit, their access rights, delete, and then the checkbox to verify that they do have access to the system. I'm going to go back over to our users, and our final option in this area is locked out users. You can see up at the top of the screen it says there's currently no locked out users. A lockout would occur if a user has logged in 5 times incorrectly, so they have typed their password wrong 5 or more times. The lockout period is going to be defaulted to 15 minutes. So if you get a call as an admin and someone says they have locked themselves out, you would come to this users locked out area and you would see their name here, and you could then click remove. That'll remove the 15-minute hold period that's been placed on them. At that point, you will probably want to go change their password. That would be back on your list users. So let's say that our Sally sample, our new user, has locked themselves out. We could go over to our list user and click edit beside her name and scroll down, and in this password, this is where we can update and change a password to then reset their password and allow them to get into their system. Next up, we've got user groups. So user groups can help streamline giving access rights to your users. So when you've got a new user like Sally Sample, we can add them to a user group, and that group already has their access set up within those data folders. Same for the Cardex and then the templates, which we will get into in our next webinar. So it allows you to group users together. So I'm going to go over to user groups and add user groups. This allows you to type in just a name of a group that you want to have. I already have some user groups set up, so let me go show you those. They're under my users group and list user groups. These are all the user groups that I created so that I can separate out the access rights that each might have. So for example, the loan originator group, they may only be able to see their own files. The processor group, I may want them to be able to see all files, but not all areas of all of the files. And then for an underwriter group access, I could give them access to different data folders and different screens so they can complete their job. After you've got these user groups set up, you're going to add your people or your users to those groups. So you would click edit next to the group that you want to add that person to. And you've got the add other users. That will allow you to select users that you've added into your PointCentral here to add it to this user group. So these are all of your users inside of Point. You could go through and click on who you want to add into this user group. Then click the Add User to Group, and they will disappear from this list. You can also see up at the top, it says the following user has been added. You don't want to have a user in more than one user group. It can start messing with the access rights and might not work properly. So you do want to make sure that you give them the proper access right in one group. Next up, we're going to look at data folders. Data folders have a purpose of helping you with your workflow of your files and organizing your company. You can give different access rights to different groups for different folders. It's really easy to customize, and it has the ability, with the different data folders, you can give different access rights to different users for each of these different data folders that you have made inside of PointCentral. So let me go over to our data folders up here. I'm going to click the list data folder so I can show you what I currently have inside here. So these are all of my data folders that I have here. You can see there is an order numbers that go up and down the screen, followed by the up and down orange arrows. If you do want to reorganize or put a folder higher or lower in the list, you would click on that arrow and it will then move that item up or down inside of your list. Some examples of the data folders that are helpful for lots of companies would be a leads or a starting active leads data folder. This is where all files would start. You could start the loan in there and then move the loan to processing once the loan became an active application or once you had sent it over to your lender. This again is just a way to help organize and create a workflow for your company. You can also see an underwriting data folder. In this data folder, you may want to have just underwriters having access to edit this and having LOs and processors in a read-only area, so this keeps that folder safe from them making any changes. You can also have a closed or a canceled data folder to help organize when files are finished. I'm going to go into our leads data folder, that first one on my list. So I'm going to click edit here, and it's going to show us what user groups have access, and that we'll go into looking at the access rights. Up top, you'll notice the data folder name and the order number. This is another way that you can switch the order in which they show in that list. You can update the number and click the update button at the bottom of the screen, and that will rearrange your order as well. Below that, we have the auto file naming. This allows you to have the name of the file saved with a numerical value. This will be based on the date that the loan is created, and it has the ability for you to add a prefix. You can select any number from these drop-downs that you'd like to appear in your loan number. I'm going to use 4 digits for the year. I'm going to use 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day, and then the counter here, I'm also going to use 2 digits. This means that I can make 99 brand new loans each day in this data folder. So I've put up here on the top right what this loan number would look like and start counting down on one day. Once you've made your selections, go ahead and click that update button, and then we're going to scroll down below to look at the access rights. There's 2 ways that you can add access rights to your data folder. The top is the recommended way, which is by adding user groups. These are the groups that we just created and that contain your different users. So this will speed up the process of adding the access rights. So let me go ahead and click on the Add User Group Access Rights. This will allow us to pick the user group from the top 3 options. So let's go ahead and select a loan originator group. While you're inside the data folder, you can always look back up at the top and it will remind you what data folder you are in. So we can see here, this is the leads folder. The access rights are broken up into different sections, so we're going to walk through those. The first section here is the loan view. This is if you want your LOs to see all of the files in the data folder, or do you want them to only see files that have their name on it? For my example, I'm going to have them only look at files that have their name on this. Other users' loans, that is right below this, gives you the ability to add any of your users to the list for all of the LOs to see. So if you did want to do that, you could select a user and click Add, and now all of your LOs would be able to see this user's files as well. Our loan access allows the user to edit and make changes in the loan, or changes it to a read-only loan for them. I'm going to keep this one as an edit, but later down in the process, such as an underwriting file, we would want to change the LO's access to read-only so they couldn't make any changes in that file. Below that, we have the conversation log. We have 3 checkboxes inside here. Conversation log allows them to add notes, edit notes, or delete notes in the system. Majority of the time, you're only going to want to give access to add notes, but it is up to your company as to how much access you give. The unchecked buttons here will be grayed out inside of Point, so that won't allow them to do those actions. The document storage area, this is doc management inside of Point. So this is where documents get uploaded or saved, like the credit report or Fannie Mae results after it's run. You have the ability to give access to adding documents, editing, that's if they needed to rename or rearrange documents. Delete would allow them to delete the whole package. You could email some documents out, print documents, and save as if you wanted to save them onto your desktop, for example. Majority of loan originators would have all of these minus the delete documents. As a company, you can decide which access rights the users have under each section. Moving on to operations, this is under loan management here. These are the abilities that the LO will have inside of the data folder. Do you want them to be able to copy the loan? This will duplicate it completely with documents and information. Move the loan to another data folder. Do you want them to be able to delete the loan? Email the loan to someone else. This does not include Calyx support. We've also got them with the ability to import and export the 3.2 and 3.4s, although that verbiage has not been updated yet. In this area, the majority of the time, a user will not have access to the delete, but again, that is up to your company what user access rights you give. We have a checkbox below that allowing offline file creation. This gives the ability for a user to still create a file if they're not connected to an internet source. When they do connect back to the internet source, then Point will ask them if they want to import that file. Under the Utilities menu, we have 3 options here. The first is the company defaults. This is inside of your Point system. This is where you have added your company name, company NMLS, and any state licenses that you might have. You can give no access, so this area will be grayed out and they won't be able to access that area. Or you can give edit access, and that means they will be able to make changes on that screen. For your drop-down list, this is where you've added in users' names. So for your loan originators, their names, their NMLS license and email, processors' names, underwriters' names. These are all that show up in the drop-down list inside of Point. Majority of the time, you do not want to have your LOs having access to make any changes of those, so we would recommend then leaving that as a no access. The audit trail, this just allows the user to see what has changed inside of the file. It doesn't allow you to make any other changes, it just shows you what has been changed. So that is an all or nothing. They can either access that or they can have no access, meaning they won't be able to see any of that. The next 3 options are the screen security under our tracking area. Under the screen securities, there are now 3 options for us. We still have the no access, so that area would be grayed out and they can't get into that screen. We have a read only now, meaning they will be able to get to that screen, but they won't be able to make changes in the file. And we have our edit, which means they are able to make changes in that file. The registration and lock screen provides an area that you can put in the locked information from a lender or a secondary marketing department. The trust account, this area allows you to record financial information such as payments, showing those coming in and out of your system. The loan profit and loss screen can help you calculate the profits and loss on a loan. There's a section for if it was originated by a bank or if it was brokered, and then you can enter payments to the LO or the processor to show the final revenue from that loan. Below that, we have our banker section. These are all screens that are found under our banker heading inside of a Point file. So you would go through and look to see if an LO would need access to that area inside of this data folder. Then you would go through and mark the no access, read only, or the edit. The underwriting screen is used to track the underwriting status of the file. In this screen, the underwriter can select their underwriting decision for the loan and create their approval or suspense notice. The closing documents. These screens are used by the closer or the funder to enter the information that's relevant to the lender when they're ordering their closing documents from a third party. The shipping screen. This is used to record closed loan data and keep track of the status of the shipment of that loan to an investor. The secondary marketing screen is used to register and lock loans. You can record the lock data for loans that are going to be funded or sold over to investors. And the screen is where the MERS number is automatically going to generate if the auto min generation is enabled inside of Point. The fees and impounds screen allows you to document the final fees or impounds for the closing of the loan. The conditions screen is where the underwriter can add conditions to the loan and clear them as well as they receive them. Warehouse and purchase advice screen. This lets you track the funding of the loan and tracks the investor's purchase advice. The screen tracks the warehouse cost of funded loans between the warehouse advance date and the warehouse repayment date. The recording screen is used to document the loan information used to record the transaction of the loan with the county. And finally, the trailing docs. This is a screen that the shippers could use to record and track the documents required by the investor after the loan is closed. Once you're done, click the Add Group Access Rights at the very bottom. And this is going to save what you've done to that access group. You can see up at the top we have the access rights have been added for the user group LO. So we have had that saved, and then we could go back to our data folders, list data folder, and see inside of the lead we now have the LOs line added to this. Another way you can add access is individually. So let me scroll down just a little bit. So you've got the Add User Access Rights below the User Group Access Rights. You would use this section if you want to give the user a little more access than what they may have in their user group. So an example of this might be you have an LO manager who needs to see all of the loans besides just their own. You could add a user. So let me click on adding a user. Let's say Sally is our manager. You go through and look at all of her access and make updates so that she would then be able to see all of the loans. Then when you're done, you would click on the Add User Access down at the bottom. And if we go back, you can now see that there is a Sally sample added individually below our group access. You go back up and over to our list data folders. So as you're creating new data folders, we do have a copy feature, so you wouldn't have to go through adding each one of your user groups individually again. We do have that option to copy. So I'm going to go into this processing data folder, and I'm going to scroll to the very bottom. At the very bottom, we have two copy buttons. The top one, you can see this says it will copy information such as company defaults and your drop-down lists. So if you've got your company address and company names or your LOs and processor and underwriters, that's what will be copied if you use that top one. The bottom one is the access rights that we just set up in the other data folder. So if I want to have this data folder have the exact same access rights as my previous folder, I can come down here, select it from the drop down. So there's my leads. Scroll back down. I'm going to click the copy button and say yes, I want to copy. You can see up at the top in red, it says access rights will be copied from the selected data folder. So now my processing data folder will have the same access rights that the leads data folder had, without me having to go through and individually add them, spending that much more time. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. We hope you've received some helpful information today. If we did not get to your question during this webinar, we will reach out shortly with that reply. At the end of this session, you are going to receive a 5-question survey, and we would appreciate you completing that so we can improve our training program and follow up with you if you so choose. To further assist you, a recording of the webinar will be available through the Calix customer portal very soon. Have a great rest of your day.